Alrighty, on to week 106 of World War II, September 5th, 1941. The war is officially 2 years old. Damn, we've been watching this for a long fucking time, and we still have a little less than 4 years to go. Oh my god. Oh my god. I'm never gonna be done. Anyways, dive in.
Yeah, well, what about the Japanese? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, how about the Italians then? Yeah?
No, Italians
Huh.
are useless.
Well, there's the Finns and the Romanians. Yeah, yeah. Oh, and the Hungarians and the Slovaks. Yeah, sure could have used the Japanese, though. Yeah. September 5th, 1941. It started as an invasion of Poland, but the European part of the Second World War has now expanded to actively involve all of Europe, the Mediterranean, most of the north half of Africa, the Middle East, and action all over the Atlantic Ocean, even as the war in East Asia has reached ever more parts of China, advanced into
Meanwhile, Turkey and Switzerland are just big chillin'.
China, and now threatens the entire Pacific. And that invasion of Poland happened just 2 years ago this week. I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week, Britain and the Soviet Union invaded Iran to protect oil supplies. In Germany's invasion of the USSR, Tallinn fell and Leningrad grew ever more isolated. There was a deadly evacuation by sea and an even deadlier blowing of a dam. And Germany's domestic euthanasia of mental and physical undesirables officially comes to an end. Of course, there are still plenty of people out there that Nazi Germany considers undesirable. This summer, over 20,000 Jews have been killed in Vilnius, and this week on the 31st comes what is often called the Great Provocation Incident. Local authorities have two civilian-clad Lithuanians break into an apartment that belongs to Jews and take a few pot shots from the window at German soldiers in front of a cinema. Then, in retaliation for this Jewish crime, all the Jews of the city are rounded up, brought first to a local prison, and then to Ponari, a suburb. Between September 1st and 3rd, 5,000 and as many as 10,000 of them are murdered there. Tomorrow, the Vilnius ghetto, well, two ghettos, the small and the large with a non-ghetto corridor running between, will be established with some 20,000 inhabitants. 3,700 Jews will die that day as well. The German army has advanced quite a bit to the north from Vilnius by now. In fact, by the 1st, the Germans are within artillery range of Leningrad and are also nearing the city from the south side of Lake Ladoga. On the 5th, Germany occupies the Estonian mainland. Now, that day, Hermann Hoth's Panzer Group 3, which has been savaging the Soviets on the right flank of Army Group North lately, is sent back to Army Group Center. So Army Group North only has Erich Hepner's Panzer Group 4 for the attack on Leningrad. The Red Army is making a few attacks of its own this week. The Western Front is continuing its attacks for starters. On the 1st, the 16th, 19th, and 20th Armies make a combined attack northeast of Smolensk on the Dukovshchina-Yartsevo line. They keep up the pressure for the rest of the week, but it ends without any major gains. But the big Soviet offensive against the German-held Yelnia salient finally strikes this week, with 8 rifle divisions, 2 tank divisions, and 1 of motorized infantry backed with artillery and rocket launchers. Georgy Zhukov's reserve front forces attack both north and south of the salient. But importantly, for the first time, this offensive is coordinated with the one at Dukovshchina and a Bryansk front one at Roslavel. On just August 30th, the Soviets pushed 10 kilometers into Gunter von Kluge's southern flank. After more heavy fighting, on the 2nd, German Army Group Center Commander Fedor von Bock decides to abandon the salient after 6 weeks of fighting. The Germans are in danger of being surrounded early in the week, and by the 5th at the end of the week, the Soviet 19th Rifle Division has penetrated into Yelnia itself. I will talk more about this next week. I mentioned the Bryansk front, and Stavka ordered it to stop Heinz Guderian's panzers driving south to join the fight for Kiev. This precipitous action coupled with Guderian's headlong southern advance, led inevitably to the piecemeal commitment and abject defeat of Yeremenko's force. Nevertheless, the Stavka insisted that the futile attacks continue. In fact, Yeremenko is ordered to attack with his entire force, surround Guderian's panzers, and then advance in order to protect the Moscow axis and his own connection with the southwestern front. Apparently, he is referred to by his peers as the Soviet Guderian, but this is still an enormous and daunting task. He orders the attack for the 2nd. It is to be in 2 thrusts. The 50th and 3rd Armies are to attack towards Roslavel with support from the reserve front. His mobile units, 108th Tank and 4th Cavalry Divisions and the 141st Tank Brigade, are meant to attack through the 3rd Army and lead the attack through Pochep toward Novgorod-Seversky. While this happens, the 13th and 21st Armies will concentrate on Semenovka and then surround and destroy the bulk of Guderian's forces in the whole Starodub, Pochep, Novgorod-Seversky area. The distance between the 2 thrusts is just under 150 kilometers. These plans require heavy regrouping and have big supply issues. Still, on the 2nd, the 2 columns advance into Guderian's forces. The Germans, though, fairly easily push Yeremenko's forces aside. And by the end of the day, the 4th Cavalry has been ruined and the 108th Tank Division partly surrounded. Guderian has, by the next day, taken bridgeheads over the Desna River and is beginning to threaten Mikhail Kirpono's rear. The German 17th Army has also captured a bridgehead south of Kremenchug on the 31st. And they, the 6th Army, and Panzer Group Kleist spend the week trying and trying again to cross the Dnieper. Germany is, of course, not fighting this war alone. They do have allies, so let's take a look at them for a sec. Okay. Japan is not going to attack the Soviets, as Germany hoped they would. And many in Japanese high command think a German quick victory over the USSR is unrealistic. Joseph Stalin has a...
Japan, I don't know how to tell you this, but Germany's chances of beating the Soviet Union is better than your chances of waging war against the USA. Like, Germans got more oil than you. Like, also, let's be real here. You are still struggling in China and have been struggling there since 1937. Okay? Like, Japan, check yourself, please.
Good spy network in Japan, and thanks to guys like Ricard Sorge and Ozaki Hotsumi, gets plenty of intel on Japanese intentions. So he's even starting to bring a lot of men and material from the Far East to the European theater. Japan had at least waited to see how the beginnings of Operation Barbarossa went before making any decisions. Benito Mussolini, on the other hand, jumped right in, even with all his commitments in North Africa, Greece, and the Balkans. The CSIR, that's the Italian Expeditionary Corps in Russia, will, however, not number more than 62,000 men. They arrive at the end of August, and Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, head of Wehrmacht Command, for all that they're supposed to be the best soldiers Italy has to offer, calls them a boundless disappointment and half soldiers incapable of standing up to the Red Army.
Damn.
But since Japan and Italy have been the 2 most prominent Axis allies of Germany, now they're kind of replaced in importance by Finland and Romania at the far left and far right flanks of the invasion force. Finland has a solid army of 475,000 men.
Jesus Christ, that's like the entire population of Finland.
And they recovered their lost territory pretty quickly, but at a heavy cost. And Finland does not have a lot of reserves. So Commander Carl Gustav Mannerheim is suspending forward operations and will play defense to protect the gains they've made. German High Command is asking for them to make more attacks, but Mannerheim informed Keitel that this went beyond the terms of their pre-war agreement and, in any case, exceeded his military capabilities. Thus, before the end of the summer, Germany had effectively lost its most worthy ally on the Eastern Front. Romania brought 325,000 men in the 3rd and 4th Armies, Army Group Antonescu, to the invasion. But the Romanian army has a lot of issues. A lot of the equipment is obsolete, the officer training is quite poor. There's also not a whole lot of industrial support from back home, and the standard of motorization it's pretty bad.
Yikes.
The attacks that took northern Bukovina and Bessarabia back early in the operation, they all had German support. But German overextension led to calls of independent Romanian action against Odessa. So the Romanian 4th Army has been attacking that city, bypassed by Army Group South, for nearly a month. Despite repeated attacks, and even taking Kubanka, which threatened the actual port of Odessa, the Romanians have taken huge casualties and are still bogged down in front of the main Soviet defenses. This may be because, as German High Command notes, the Romanians are using World War I tactics, having the
How are there so many incompetent generalships happening? Like, the amount. I can understand a few. I can understand a few. But literally every single country is damn near super fucking incompetent here. Like, what?
The infantry make unsupported frontal attacks against Soviet trenches. They now stop the attacks, exhausted, and will wait for reinforcements to arrive. As to Hitler's other allies, the Slovaks fielded 41,000 men. But back on July 22nd at Lipovech got a taste of organized Red Army formations and were decimated. They are not well trained and equipped and are going to be mostly used for rear area security jobs. There are also 45,000 of Miklos Horthy's Hungarian troops, though nearly half of that is used for security tasks, and the Mobile Corps is 24,000 men. These guys have fought well, even compared to Panzer Group Kleist, who they fought alongside. But now, heavy casualties have caused their leadership to want to withdraw, seeing that it will not be a quick war, and they don't have a lot of depth for a long one. Horthy approaches Hitler about this, but Hitler will not allow their withdrawal. Hitler has other things to worry about too, like basic logistics. The assumption had been made during Barbarossa's planning stage that large quantities of Soviet rolling stock and locomotives would be captured in the initial phases of the campaign, providing support for the drive into the Soviet Union. Yet, once the initial shock and confusion of the invasion had passed, the Soviets were quick to institute an extensive evacuation of their trains with the subsequent demolition of those remaining behind.
Kaboom.
This was so effective that by the end of August 1941, the Germans had captured only around 1,000 locomotives, of which just half were still operational.
Damn.
This critical setback had two major repercussions for the German campaign. First, the army became almost immediately reliant on extending the narrow gauge lines as quickly as possible in order to assume the enormous burden of sustaining operations to the east. Planning for this conversion did not assume the effects the Soviet scorched earth policy would have on the railroads and installations, nor the extent of destruction caused by the Luftwaffe and frontline units. The conversion was therefore slower than expected and achieved only the most rudimentary standards of quality control. The second complication of the German failure to capture large numbers of Soviet trains was that the deficit had to be made up by the already overextended German railways. Logistically, the Germans do seem to be doing better at sea. In August, in the Battle of the
Wild statement.
Atlantic, German U-boats sank 23 ships for 80,300 tons and lost just 3 of their own number. However, on the 1st, the U.S. Atlantic Fleet forms a Denmark Straits Patrol. This is 2 heavy cruisers and 4 destroyers at the moment, but will be increased. The U.S. Navy is now permitted by its government to escort ships from any nation as long as an American merchant ship is present. On the 4th, the American destroyer Greer becomes the first American warship attacked by a German U-boat of this war.
Gasp.
It is undamaged.
Oh.
In fact,
USA.
the Greer has been brought into action by the reports of a British aircraft and has been mistaken, not unreasonably, for a British ship by the German commander. Roosevelt, however, presents the incident to the American public as an example of German aggression. Also this week at sea, on August 30th, the first boat of the Shetland bus begins operations. This is a clandestine organization formed by the SOE, British Naval Intelligence, and Norwegian military intelligence that will maintain contact with the Norwegian resistance and ferry people and equipment between Shetland and Norway. And that brings us to the end of the week. With the occupation of the Estonian mainland in the north, Soviet attacks in the center, German attacks in the south, and Romanian attacks.
This gives me throwback to the early days of, not the early days of YouTube, but like, you know, the early 20-teens of YouTube.
At Odessa. 2 years. That is how long I have been hosting this channel. And the war continues to grow ever larger. Martin Gilbert has a few words about the end of the second year of the war. 2 years had passed since the German invasion of Poland. In the east, 70 days had passed since the German invasion of the Soviet Union. The victorious German war machine destroyed whatever it wished to destroy. Polish intellectuals, Soviet prisoners of war, Yugoslav partisans, French resistance fighters, each felt the full force. The Jews, scattered among many nations, were singled out for torture, murder, and abuse. In Germany, September 1st marked the day on which all the remaining Jews of Germany, including the 76,000 in Berlin, were ordered to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothing. Happy anniversary. 2 days ago, on the Sabaton History Channel.
And that was week 106 of World War II. The war is 2 years old. Not quite, I mean, it's still depressing, a depressing end, but in overall, the episode itself did not have as much, I guess, very blatant, depressing topic, unlike the week 105, in which, you know, that video ended with, what, 4 minutes of murder? Yeah, that's on to the next one.